Once upon a time, long, long ago, SUVs weren't pointless. You see, before they inexplicably became the go-to type of car for everyone and their mums, they were specialised kinds of vehicles designed for a certain kind of person who lived a certain kind of lifestyle. Outdoorsy types, those who live in remote corners of the world where normal cars might struggle with the unmade roads in winter. Those who, of a Saturday, might spontaneously throw a couple of muddy dogs and mountain bikes in the back and go for an adventure. SUVs used to be designed specifically for them. And in that sense, what we have here today is a bit of a throwback. You see, this is the new Subaru Solterra, and it claims to be an SUV for people that actually do SUV stuff. So what does that mean? And is it any good? And what took them so long? Well, to find out, we've come here to the outdoors. This is a very grey and drizzly North Wales. That is the first ever electric Subaru. And this is the Fully Charged Show.
Like the Fully Charged Show? Then you will love our 6 live shows being held around the world in 2023, starting with Sydney, Australia on March the 11th and 12th.
Now, before diving into the Subaru, there is an elephant in the room that needs addressing, because the eagle-eyed EV nerds among you might have noticed that this car bears a striking resemblance to another new electric car, the Toyota BZ4X. Like a really striking resemblance. Like same car, different badge level of resemblance. This is no freaky coincidence. The two cars are the result of a collaboration between Toyota and Subaru, presumably designed to reduce cost. Theoretically, this means you get the best of both brands. Toyota provides the platform and the battery and motor know-how acquired from 2 decades of Prius. Subaru does the handling and the off-roady stuff that it is best known for.
But there are a couple of key differences between the Toyota and the Subaru. For one, we at Fully Charged were actually invited to drive the Subaru, whereas Toyota don't really speak to us. And in fairness, this may have something to do with Robert's tireless commitment to calling out their self-charging hybrids marketing shtick for what it really is, a load of deceptive hot guff. Or something to do with our calling out of Toyota's willful spreading of anti-EV misinformation, or calling out their CEO for literally being one of the biggest anti-EV lobbyists in the world, which he is. The other key difference is that the Subaru comes exclusively with a full-time all-wheel drive system.
On paper, it's not a great start for the Subaru. With a £50,000 starting price, it costs as much as an all-wheel drive Ioniq 5, but has a substantially smaller battery, 64 kilowatt hours usable. It's not exactly efficient either. We'll get into the particulars of the efficiency later on in the video, but for now, all you need to know is the 257-mile quoted range is ambitious. I was seeing nearer 160 miles during my time with the car, which, if we're being honest, is not great.
So, does the Subi make up for what it lacks in range through SUV legitimacy? Well, let's have a very, very speedy walk around. Very speedy. I want to get to the inside bits of this video because it's horrible out here. At the front, we've got a pretty safe design, I think it's fair to say. It's kind of grown on me. It is quite a smart looking thing, but they have played it safe. I guess not everyone wants to drive a Kia EV6 Ioniq 5 spaceship. Some people just want a regular old car, and this is certainly one of those. Around the side, we've got this plastic cladding around the wheels that's generated a lot of discourse. You can't really see it so much when the car is black, but I really like it. In my head, this is kind of a subtle design middle finger to pretend SUVs with their little strip of plastic and sort of vaguely off-roading capabilities. This is a proper SUV. It's got big bits of rugged plastic. That's what that is in my head. I don't know if they meant it that way, but I like these. Ground clearance, 8.3 inches of ground clearance. That is significantly more than any of its rivals. I think the thing that comes closest is the Aria, which is somewhere in the 7s, but in terms of ID4s and Ioniq 5s and EV6s, not even close, not even close. Also worth noting that because we have that bespoke EV platform, we've got nice short overhangs front and rear, that's good for off-roading. We've got a full-time all-wheel drive system, that's good for off-roading. And then round the back, we have one of the most outstanding features on this Subi. It's the boot, because look at the back of this car. Look how square and boxy the rear end is. Not especially pretty to my eye, but when you open the boot, you realise why. Because the opening is big and square and boxy. Look at that. Look how flat this lip is. No lip whatsoever. No issues lifting heavy objects in. Super big gap to cram in, well, whatever you need to. Large dogs, for example. It's only 441 litres with the seats up. That's some 100 litres less than our ID4 crew car. But because of the way it's been designed, it looks absolutely enormous. I'm constantly being asked by people, which is the best electric car for people with large dogs? No, seriously, I get asked that all the time. Well, I now have a definitive answer. That is the best opening I've seen since Andy and I shared a hotel room in Berlin one time. Oh yes, we're into Subi country now, people. So let's talk a little bit about the off-roading capabilities of the Solterra. And a quick caveat, this is not especially hardcore off-roading. In fact, this is sort of just what roads look like in this part of North Wales. If we're being completely honest, any new electric SUV could quite easily get along this road. Our ID4 camera car could get down here. In fact, it is. That's how we're getting the B-roll that you're looking at right now. But I will say this, I can see how carefully Louis is having to drive that car over the big holes, and I can see how close it is to bottoming out when the middle bit of the road gets a little bit higher. If this road was to get 10–15% hairier, they'd be in a spot of bother. Oh, it's happening. We've deemed that the road is getting a little bit too spicy for the ID4, so he's gonna head back and leave me to it. Good thing that the car's beeping to let me know that I'm reversing, otherwise how would I know? Whereas this Subaru is absolutely breezing this, just like it did the beach earlier on today. I'm in X mode, which is the off-road setting, where the car is carefully sending the right amount of power to the right wheel to ensure maximum grip. It makes loose surfaces absolutely effortless, and I firmly believe that if the going were to get a bit tougher, like proper off-roady, this car would smoke any of the existing range of electric SUVs, most of which are really not designed to go off-road at all and barely have more ground clearance than a standard car. Right, interior of the Subaru Solterra. There are some things I like in here, and there's some things I don't like in here. So I thought I'd give you a pros and cons list. You know, compliment sandwich, the rough with the smooth. Let's go from the beginning. Pro, there is some really nice, proper SUV stuff in here. I really like this recycled fabric on the dash. I'm a big fan of that. It makes it feel outdoorsy. Con, there are also some really quite nasty plastics and yucky buttons in here. All of this I'm not super sure about. These buttons on the wheel are a bit icky and cheap feeling to press, and likewise this plastic up here is really not very nice at all. Pro, everyone who isn't the driver in the Subaru Solterra gets ample space both for their head and feet. Big roomy cabin, lots of space behind me, even in my weird tall man driving position. Con, the driving position is absolutely bizarre. It's so strange. I think it's a kind of byproduct of this cockpit thing they've got where the screen is way back there. As a result, the wheel has ended up being really small and really low down. To see the screen, I've got to have the wheel there. And if I have the wheel there, then I'm bumping into my own knee. I feel like I'm driving like this. Not like this, like this. That's how it feels driving the Subaru Solterra to me. The seat is way too high, the floor is way too high. It's really not good ergonomically. Pro, I've got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless in this car, and it looks fantastic on this big 12-point-something inch screen. It's such a pet peeve of mine when Apple CarPlay and Android Auto only use a small section of the screen available. Look, it fills out the screen. Isn't that nice? Con, and this is not a big one because who uses the actual car infotainment system? Everyone just uses Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But the actual car infotainment is a little bit difficult to get to grips with. Look at this. This is the screen where we should have all the different apps and menus. There's just nothing there. Likewise, you kind of Everything that you might want to fiddle with and tinker is buried in settings. And I'm normally quite good at this stuff because I do this for a living. I cannot figure out how to pair the car with the app on my phone, the Subaru app, so that I can see charging status. I cannot figure it out. This is day 3 with this car. I have no idea how to do it. Pro, like all Subarus and Toyotas, this car comes with an absolute suite of safety features, most of which work extremely well. The radar guided cruise control, really, really effective. There's also something called exit assist, which actually I think we should show you that separately.
Safe exit assist works much in the same way as blind spot assist does, except instead of making you aware of cars you may not be able to see while driving, it warns you of oncoming motorcycles or bicycles as you're getting out of your parked car. Allow us to demonstrate.
Now, we don't have a cyclist or motorcyclist, but what we do have is cameraman Louis, who is currently limbering up just behind the car. So I'm going to make him run really fast past the car. We're going to see if we can trigger it. Here we go. Go on, Lou! Con, and I suppose it's a con of having all those safety features, I have never been beeped at more in my life in a car. This thing beeps at you when you look away from the windscreen for more than 2 seconds while driving. You're fiddling with the radio. Beep, 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 pay attention. Look out the window. It's the same thing. It beeps at you when your passenger takes their seatbelt off, even if the car is in park. It beeps at you when you're reversing. Why is it beeping? I know. I did that. That was my choice. Overall thoughts on this cabin: effective but drab would be my summary. Most of it works pretty well, but when you think about the style and desirability that you're getting from some of these electric SUVs, Aria, EV6, Megane, Ioniq, this is not a patch on them. So then, out on the road in the Subaru Solterra, because we figured we should at least do some of this video on an actual road. And once again, the story here is one of a real mixed bag. Let's start with the good. This thing drives extremely well. The power delivery is smooth, the power itself is ample, but not excessive. The suspension is supple, it handles bumps and imperfections in the road really nicely, but still manages to be really flat and controlled through corners. It handles itself extremely well. I would even go so far as to call it fun to drive on these beautiful, twisty Welsh B roads. But then there's the less good stuff. And for me, almost all of it falls into the category of first EV noob mistakes. They are errors and misjudgments that sort of betray the fact that Subaru and Nissan don't have much experience with electric vehicles. For example, my strongest regen setting isn't strong enough for proper one pedal driving. It doesn't bring the car to a complete stop, meaning I have to use the brake pedal. That is a pet peeve of mine. I want to be able to do one pedal driving in every EV that I drive. Even more annoying than that is the fact that if I put the car into park or even reverse, it completely forgets the settings that I had, which is to say, if I have my max regen on and then I reverse and I go into drive, regen is gone. It's gone and I have to smash the pedal a few times to get it back. Frustrating. But potentially worst of all is the battery readout, because I don't have any clear percentage on this gauge cluster in front of me. I've just got a little bar and it's really vague. There's no number, there's no metric to show me exactly how much battery is left. And you combine that with the poor efficiency and the relatively small battery, and you've got yourself some proper range anxiety. And let's talk about that inefficiency, because that for me is the cardinal sin of this car. 2.5 miles to the kilowatt hour. That has been my average efficiency across the 3 days that I've had this car. That includes the long drive here to North Wales from East London, which involved lots of stoppy-starty city driving, lots of motorway driving, and lots of twisty Welsh roads. Right now, it's actually gone down to 2.4 miles to the kilowatt hour, but in defense of the car, we have just been doing donuts on a beach for a couple of hours. That is simply not good enough. For a brand new EV released in 2022, 2023, that is just inexcusably inefficient. My Polestar will average 3 to 3.2 miles to the kilowatt hour, and that is a real bugbear of mine with that car. That's quite inefficient relative to some of the new stuff coming out right now. 2.5 miles. to the kilowatt hour. It's almost as bad as the Ford F-150 Lightning that we drove in the US, a car that is the size of Wales. Given that this car is a joint venture with Toyota, given that Toyota has 2 decades of hybrid experience under its belt with the Prius, I would have hoped that they would be a lot better at the EV techie bits. And actually, for all its foibles, if this car was exceptionally efficient, if it was really eking out every last mile from its modest sized battery, I'd be prepared to excuse a lot of the idiosyncrasies that it has. But as it is, I can't forgive that number. I took delivery of this car expecting a 250-mile EV because that's what Subaru claims. I planned this trip to North Wales where there are no chargers on that assumption. And actually, from my experience, 160, 170 miles is doing pretty well. It's not especially cold out. It's not that wintry this week. There really are no excuses. And it has made this trip a little bit stressful, let me tell you, because we've had to grab charge wherever we can. Concluding thoughts on the Subaru Solterra. It's a tricky one. I do have a little bit of a soft spot for this car because in a world where the term SUV has lost all meaning, and at this point really just means slightly higher driving position and some extra plastic bits on the outside, this feels a bit like a breath of fresh air. This is an SUV that wants to be used and abused. It wants to be gotten muddy and treated like a utility vehicle. And I like that about it. But it is quite compromised in a number of ways. To me, this car betrays the fact that the brand who made it don't have very much experience of electric vehicles. It shows in the inefficiency, in the lack of range, in the slightly poorly thought out interface. And it just goes to show how far the Japanese car brands have allowed themselves to fall behind their rivals by willfully refusing to participate in the whole EV movement. Well, they're finally here now, and I'm glad that they are. But they've got some catching up to do because this to me feels like too little too late. So, Subaru Solterra, final thoughts. Is this indeed the electric SUV for people that really do SUV stuff? Well, I suppose it is, actually, with the full-time all-wheel drive, the off-road settings, the short overhangs, the high ground clearance, the excellent boots. I do think that this car caters to a certain set of requirements that the existing crop of electric SUVs that aren't really SUVs, but are really just tall cars with plastic bits, sort of don't. If indeed you live on the side of a cliff and have 2 Great Danes, your chariot awaits. But for everyone else, I'd look elsewhere. As an overall package, it's not quite good enough. The range and efficiency are unacceptable, the interior is a bit meh, and well, the competition is just so good at this point that if you're going to show up late, you need to come correct. In short, Subaru, Toyota, welcome to the EV party. We're delighted to have you here. But you've got some catching up to do. So there we go, Subaru Solterra. I'm now going to do a very range anxiety filled drive back to London. Wish me luck, like and subscribe, and if you have been, thank you for watching.